As we have seen, claiming that we have found the location of Atlantis is to miss the point a bit of Plato's story. But Jimmy Corsetti claimed to have found what he believes Atlantis' actual location, the Richat Structure. The issue is that you can throw a dart on a world map, and wherever it lands, the likelihood of someone claiming it to be the location of Atlantis is quite significant. People have suggested places all over the world to be the inspiration or the actual location of Atlantis. My favorite are, of course, Olaus Rudbeck in 1679 suggested Gamla Uppsala or Old Uppsala in Sweden to be the location of Atlantis. Then we also have this marvelous Finnish tour guy and quite the eccentric Ior Bock, who claimed that Atlantis was, of course, in Finland. Now, just because there are numerous different claims of Atlantis' location, this does not invalidate Corsetti's claim by themselves. But it do raise a bit of a red flag when we encounter these type of claims. Suppose Sweden, Bahamas, Malta, America, India, all are possible location of Atlantis. In that case, something is a bit off since they are so different in both geological and historical, and yeah, they are basically incredible different and a source for concern here. Now, to be fair, Corsetti did not come up with this idea, I believe. He repeats claims made by George S. Alexander and Nathalie Rosen, who made a documentary in 2018 called Visiting Atlantis. I decided to go with Corsetti's video because it's publicly available on YouTube and seems to have a larger spread compared to this rather unknown documentary that you find on the network Gaia. Of course, you find it on Gaia, but that's a source for more headaches later. Jimmy also is, of course, influenced by Graham Hancock and Randall Carson, spending quite some time in this video linking Atlantis to the Younger Dryas impact idea, just as Graham Hancock and the other do. We have yet to deal with YDI, but it will happen after I sort out some scheduling things there. But even if this impact would be a true event, it would not really change much of history. We have a lot of data and excavation and research done on the period in question where this event took place. And we know that the chance or likelihood of an advanced society matching Plato's description existing during this time is slim to none. But yes, we can't shake the ghost of Graham Hancock of us. Yet, at least. But let's look at the claims about the Richat structure themselves. Corsetti claims that the Richat structure is a good fit because it has concentric rings. Now, this is true. The formation that consists of an eroded dome has sedimentary rock visible that kind of look like rings. We know quite a lot of the site's geology, and the site has been known since at least 1940, probably a bit earlier. The dome was, what I can find at least, first described in a journal by Frenchman Richard Mollard in 1948. Later, the French naturalist Theodore Monod launched an expedition there in the 1950s that resulted in further publication on the site itself. And in the beginning, the Richat Dome was often referred to as the Richat Crater. And for some time, there was an idea that the structure was formed by a meteoric impact. But today we know a lot more on how this structure was formed. In 2005, for example, Matton et al. Published a paper that clearly demonstrates the formation of the dome and the geological process involved. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a geologist, and I'm sure I'd butcher an explanation of the process of hypothermal infill and magmatism within the structure and how the hypothermal fluidation caused dissolving within the dome. So I will leave that to better experts on that matter, but as you kind of understand, the process, well, it's understood among geologists themselves at least. Now, the structure has been dated with argon dating to be formed around 92.2 plus minus 2.6 million years ago. But to say the least, we know quite a deal about the geological process in the area. All this makes Corsetti's statement that, quote, in fact, the Richat structure wasn't even discovered until the Gemini 4 mission in 1965, and is now a common landmark utilized by astronauts. A bit odd, to be honest. Since Corsetti doesn't list any sources that he used in the video, I can't really say where he got this claim. I can only tell you that it's entirely wrong. Something that makes his explanation of the formation even weirder, because he gets that process almost correct, kind of, except that he says that this can't of course be proven. Suspect that Corsetti did not read any of the studies on the dome, but just repeat what he heard from secondary sources that leave a lot of information out, showing us that we can all be victims of fraud and the importance of checking the sources and asking experts on their input on the different subjects that we cover. But could there be any other evidence that fit Plato's narrative? Well, according to Corsetti, it seems to be the case. He says, quote, "It just so happens that the diameter of its outer circle is approximately 23.5 kilometers or 14.5 miles, which is basically equivalent to the size and dimension provided by Plato when converting from stadia to modern measurements. For example, the circular island of Atlantis was described to be 127 stadia." Now, I'm not sure what translation Corsetti using, but from my translation, I get the following measurement, and I used several different accounts. All of them say the same. The first ring of water is 3 stadia. Then we have the first landmass, that's also 3 stadia. Then we have the second ring of water and the second landmass, that's 2 stadia each. The third ring of water is 1 stadia, and the inner island has a diameter of 5 stadia. So if we count everything together, we land on a diameter of 21 stadia. And if we include the first ring of water, we get 27 stadia. And translating this to metrics, we have 4.2 kilometers, or roughly 2.6 miles. So this is not near the claim made by Corsetti. Again, I can't find where he got it. I assume it's the Atlantis documentary, but everything written about it leads to his video. So I'm going to blame his on that one. You're free to show your work there, Corsetti. At least we can now put this to rest. The measurement does not add up between Atlantis in Plato and the Richat structure. Now, I don't want to appear as someone who nitpicks, so I will gloss over some things. For example, he brings up a mountain range, and Corsetti claims that it matched Plato's description, but it doesn't really matter much for the story, since we can find mountains all over the world that would be able to match this, more or less. The same with the inlet. He claims that on the satellite pictures we can see an inlet to the south, matching Plato's description, but if you look at the satellite image, you will notice that it's a bit to the southwest. I will skip over most of them since they don't really bring much to the table in any sense. And also, it would be too much just me ripping on someone. We're not here to debunk, we're here to learn. We're here to use the scientific method to better ourselves and our understanding of the world around us and our own histories. Now, there are also a couple of obvious things that disqualify Richat structure as the site of Atlantis that we have not discussed yet. First of all, Plato gives us the island's location in his text, and it is outside the Pillars of Heracles. This is what the Greek called the Strait of Gibraltar, and the origin of this name comes from the 10th labor of Heracles that he performed where he went as far west as possible. Now, the Richat structure lies far south of Gibraltar, obviously not outside in it in any sense of that word. Would not the Egyptian Solons or even Plato be able to say south instead of hinting west? It's a pretty strange that these people are supposed to be the wisest of them all get simple cardinal points wrong here. Corsetti also quotes Plato, who, according to Jimmy, tells us that Atlantis is now landlocked. I don't know what translator Corsetti is working from, but from the ones I've read, the quote should be something like this. Though by now earthquake have caused it to sink, and it has left behind the unnavigable mud, which obstruct those who sail there. I would argue that it's hard to sail through sand. Note that Plato claims that you can actually sail here, it's just difficult to navigate in the area, since it has all of these muddy waters. Furthermore, this geological feature is about 500 kilometers or more than 310 miles from the nearest coastline. It's an understatement to say that this formation is heavily landlocked, but it's not close to the ocean or has been in any point in history. But Corsetti claims something rather strange here. Quote, "And something else we should consider is that the sands of the Sahara actually originate from the sea. An interesting fact that many people are not aware of." So Corsetti's idea is, or whoever he got this from, is that the sand in Sahara must have been created by the ocean. This is a strange statement for, well, several reasons. Maybe most obviously since we know quite a deal about how deserts form, and the Sahara is not the result of land being underwater. While the Sahara ecosystem looked different in the past, it's never been underwater, and still neither has it always actually been a desert. But it was formed by extreme temperature shift during night and day that break the rocks, add a lack of rain and erosion of the topsoil combined with siltation, a process that carry minor sand and leaving the greater block behind. The process might vary slightly depending on what desert we are looking at or talking about. Now, even if seawater has not reached the Richat Structure, a large river did actually once flow through the Sahara. In 2019, O'Hara et al. Published a paper describing the Trans-Saharan Seaway. This was a large river flowing from the middle of what we know today as Algeria down through East Mali and then exiting in the east of Nigeria and around Benin. This seaway was almost 50 meters deep at some places and contained a wide array of sea life. This river was possible due to the global sea level at the time was a lot higher than it is today. It was actually 300 meters above today's levels. It might be good to add that this existed during the late Cretaceous era, meaning this river existed somewhere between 100 to 66 million years ago. I would like you aware that the fact that even when the sea level was 300 meters above today's level, the Richat Dome is still 500 kilometers from the coastline. And according to the data I found, the coast has mostly stayed the same for millions and millions of years. This area has never been close to any large body of water. But it doesn't stop Corsetti from throwing numbers around and trying to make his water-covered Sahara idea, combining land rise, sea levels with numbers I have no idea where he got them from. Some areas indeed see annual land rise. For example, here in Scandinavia, due to it having been pushed down by the giant glacier during the last ice age. We see an annual land rise. We know how large it is historically, and we can use data to calculate where the coastline have been throughout the ages in softwares like ArcGIS. And that way we can see in the maps and during excavations where the coastline must have been. For example, during the Viking Age, harbors at Västergarn on Gotland or in Paviken were located, of course, by the water, but we find them a couple hundred meters up. So, we are quite sure on how the landrise have been and how rapid it was. And we can use that to backtrace the coastline. But we don't see this process in Africa since it did not have giant glaciers over there to push the continent down. Corsetti make the same mistake as Hancock. They look at graphs and data and then try to interpret it without really knowing what they have just read. That's why you need an expert to help with this type of. So Corsetti is making the same mistake as Hancock. They look at a graph and then try to apply that data without really comprehending it to their theories and text, getting it quite a lot wrong, and don't really understand sea level rise and land rise and the difference between them and the different forces that operate these processes in nature. And we should of course not forget archaeological evidence, and there have been excavations, especially since there's been finds of Acheulean industries within the outer part of the Richat dome. Acheulean is a type of hand axe technology that's maybe most associated with Homo erectus, but was used until the Neanderthals too. The technology disappeared around 130,000 years ago. Then there's find of your typical Saharan arrowheads and later iron spearhead within the area. Something that we could expect from hunter-gatherers to have and get lost, and well, the area has actually been populated throughout history. I must admit that the archaeology in the area seems to be relatively sparse, but from the excavation and surveys, nothing really indicates a city like Atlantis existed there. Just think about the artifacts that should still be there if Plato's description was accurate. In the account, each ring had a thick wall covered with different metals, or each ring had each one metal. Just imagine this sturdy, large metal wall must have been. There must have been other buildings, the roads, the harbors, metalwork, masonry, all the other things that were expected to find in a civilization this large. Just imagine how much food and waste a city like this must have produced. Well, I've excavated relative small settlements, and even there we find tons, literal tons of animal bones, broken pottery, and waste that people leave behind. Signs that people live there, and we're just talking a couple of houses here. But nothing of this had been found in the Richat structure or its vicinities. So Corsetti using a bit of special pleading to solve this, claiming that these things are not here because, well, Atlantis was destroyed and wiped off the earth by a great flood. But it's hard to believe that a flash flood, even a gigantic flash flood, would have wiped absolute everything but left Acheulean hand axes and Neolithic arrowheads. And from the arrowheads I managed to find that were found unspecified where within the area, but within the area, that these arrowheads seems to be from around the time where Atlantis should have existed. So it's a bit weird that they survive and was used in this great advanced civilization, while the great walls, literally covered in metal, was wiped away. That does not really make sense, at least to me. Your mileage might differ there. Now, after spending quite some time investigating Atlantis and the Richat structure, I think there's not much left of Corsetti's evidence. When being looked through a neutral lens, each claim has been sufficiently disproven. I believe this might be Jimmy's most prominent issue. He's not going out looking for the truth there, really. He, just like Hancock and many others within this field, picks an idea and then starts to select different data all around that fits his preferred narrative. As I mentioned, Corsetti does bring up some of these things that we talk about, but as you might have noted, he had either taken them out of context or made significant changes to the facts themselves to fit his idea. He even rewrites Plato's own words so the story will fit what he's telling you. So I hope you, Jimmy Corsetti, listen to this or read an article that I publish on the website and maybe rethink your approach, or even better, you put out a correction on all of this. I'd be happy to lend a hand to verify your sources. I'm happy to provide my sources. You find them on the website, diggingupancientaliens.com. Look at the episode page. Everything is listed there. Or any other support that I might be able to give you. But Jimmy, there's hope. I believe in you. I think you will do the right thing. Thank you for listening. And on this bombshell, we will close out the episode. But we're not finished just yet. Remember that you can find sources, resources, and further reading suggestions on our website, diggingupancientaliens.com. There you will also find my contact info if you want to write that all caps email I know you're hankering for. You can leave a comment down below, or just reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter, if it still exists, Instagram. I also post content on TikTok, as often I manage to do that at least. And of course, you can see this on YouTube, and you can support the show by giving a great review firsthand, but you can also become a patron. You can also support the Archaeological Podcast Network, become a member there. It will trickle down to me in the end too, and you get access to all the network's shows and bonus content. So that's something maybe worth looking into. But here I will leave you for this time. Our intro was made by Sandra Mertelor. Our outro is by the great, amazing Swedish punk band Trallskruv. The song is named Tinfoil Hat, but sung in Swedish. And links to these authors can be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep shoveling that science.
Det är en galen fantasi att aliens manipulerar oss med telepati. Ni tycker att jag redan är besatt, men jag skyddar mig för jag har foliehatt. Och så säger ni